Welcome back. Who will win this latest clash between development and the environment on the Suncoast? If you haven't heard of Aqua by the Bay, perhaps you know it by its former incarnation, Longbar Point, and perhaps you know of the head of the powerful developer who is behind it, Carlos Baruf, the former Senate candidate, current chairman of the Constitution Review Commission, and the big-time Republican player and contributor. Baruf's first proposal to develop the scenic and environmentally sensitive site was rejected, but he is now back with a name change and plans to build almost 3,000 homes. And joining us for more is the former Manatee County Commissioner Joe McClash and Andy Mealy, the Suncoast waterkeeper. And we want to note we invited Carlos Baruf to join us as well as a representative from the County Commission. Our requests were turned down. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. There was a recent column in the Sarasota Herald that talked about the last commission meeting when the proposal was kicked back to the planning board, and it took note of Mr. Baruf's use of the word, "I would personally appreciate your consideration on that." And after Kate's story describing his support for some of the current commission members, what do you make of that, Joe?
Well, you wouldn't ask a judge to be personally appreciating, something that, the judge is doing. And county commissioners are very similar to judges when they're dealing with these land use matters. So it was very inappropriate for that comment. But I think it also shows the attitude of the individual. I really have labeled Mr. Baruf as a political bully. He has great influence in the state, and he's using those powers to do things that he shouldn't be able to do.
The obvious question that some people who are watching this might ask right now is your opposition to this proposal and to Mr. Baruf and generally tied back to what he did when you were trying to run for re-election?
No, I think the evidence is real clear. Look at the Army Corps of Engineers rejecting his latest mitigation bank proposal. Our environmental groups are saying this isn't right, what he's doing. And then the Army Corps twice so far says, you know what, you guys are right. When he went to the state to get the mitigation bank, the first time that the reviewers looked at it, it was a scathing letter about the mitigation bank, much like the Army Corps. Guess what? Somebody made a phone call up in Tallahassee, and the next thing you know, it was a 180, and all of a sudden the mitigation bank got permitted. And the first time it got permitted, it got withdrawn by Mr. Baruf, and then the second time, it got permitted, and it's currently being challenged by myself and Suncoast waterkeepers.
This is a complicated issue. I want to get to all of it. But Andy, let me ask you this, because if you saw in Kate's story, the representative from the Builders Association said, for all the stated concern about the environmental issues, the wetlands and the mangroves, this plan would not disturb any of them. How do you respond to that?
That's completely disingenuous, completely false. It was absolutely designed and intended to be deceptive. When Baruf went to the FDEP with his mangrove mitigation bank, he used this, which shows no upland development whatsoever. Then, when he went to Swiftmud for permission to fill wetlands, he showed this.
Hold it up a little bit more.
Which has 24 150-foot buildings located on it. And then when he made his application to the county, there were no buildings shown again, even though the code and the land development code clearly states that if you're looking for a variance on your heights, you have to have your building plan there showing the locations on the property.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why the County Commission is kicking it back to the Planning Board is because there was an impression, whether it was mistaken or not, that this development would include 2 buildings and not more.
Correct. I mean, and it's hard to believe after 2 years in reviewing that a planner wouldn't ask the question, is there only 2 of these buildings being built on this to accommodate 2,800 units?
Well, then you're raising the question or the idea of, do you think there was blind ignorance there, or could it have been an honest mistake?
Well, let's put it this way. The staff report with that type of information went back to Mr. Baruf's attorney, Mr. Vogler, and his team, and they looked at it, and they had the opportunity to tell the county, this really isn't the right perception that you're creating here, that there's only 1 of each of these buildings. We're actually going to build a lot more than that. As a matter of fact, we have, the permit that we applied for with Swiftmud showing 24 10-story buildings.
Okay, we will pick this up in just a moment, right after we get a check on the forecast, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the controversial Aqua by the Bay project, formerly known as Longbar Point. It got initial approval from the Manatee County Planning Commission, but that was before board members realized it could be comprised of more than 2 buildings. Opponents say the project could damage the Sarasota Bay estuary and protected plants. Joining us for more on tonight's topic is former Manatee County Commissioner Joe McClash and Andy Melee of the Suncoast Waterkeepers. And we want to discuss all of that, but I want to kind of push back from the perspective of the builders. If you remember in Kate's story that she just did, Mary Dockley's slap of the Gulf Coast Business Exchange, Builders Exchange, that says that that a lot of the opposition is residual to the former plan that was introduced, and that the idea of that former plan was to put Manatee County on the map. And one might say is, don't we want this? Don't we want projects like this to get more people to live in our community, to pay taxes in our community? The construction of this project would bring jobs to the area. Isn't that something that we want?
Well, certainly it's something that we want, and it's already happening. We don't need to have a unique project that destroys all the environmental components that we really enjoy in this community. You know, whether you're a fisherman or whether you're person that just likes to take an eco tour and get out on the bay, you know, this project would destroy a natural area, a natural shoreline that the codes and rules say it needs to be protected. And anybody that wants to use that argument that we need more jobs and we need more traffic, I mean, just look around in Manatee County. We can't handle the traffic we have now. Not to say that we should stop building, but we have a healthy economy based on the buildings that are taking place now, and there's no reason to introduce something that is so different to the character of Manatee County, something that the people in Manatee County have stood up and said over and over again to their county commissioners and their city council, whether it be on the islands of Longboat Key or Anna Marie Island, that we want to be unique. We want to be a low-rise community. We don't want to look like Miami.
Right.
You know, and then somebody comes up and says, you know, we want to be like Celebration here on Sarasota Bay. Well, that's the worst place in the world.
Kathy Fannin, a lady who does eco tours out of Cortez, said very tellingly that nobody's ever asked her to go see a tall building. Nobody's ever asked her to go look at a seawall. It's always to go look at the mangroves, to go look at the fish. The bay is the economic driver of this region, of its tourism. And if you'll indulge me for a second, I will show you what this project is going to do. This is a visual simulation of what the beautiful, pristine shoreline is going to look like, approximately, if Aqua by the Bay gets built, with this wall of 150-foot buildings.
Now, you showed that to Carlos Brew, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I did.
And what was the reaction?
His face was blank. They had not thought to, or had basically decided it was better not to try anything like a visual simulation. And my pitch to the county commissioners was, not only do they owe you a building plan so you see what they're actually going to do, and so that we know what they're actually going to do, but they owe you a visual simulation so that you can see what the bay, what they're going to do to the bay, which is this beautiful, astonishing place with the azure waters. And
going back to the mangrove issue, because there was a disagreement about whether or not mangroves would be impacted by this construction. We talked about the mitigation bank. I want you both to, number one, discuss what that is, and number two is if there is a plan to mitigate anything that is destroyed in construction of this project, and you're basically planting or preserving mangroves in other areas. Is that not a good thing?
Well, first of all, let's put it this way. If you're going to do a development, normally you show the community the whole plan. Like back in 2013, the community objected. So what's taking place now is this piecemeal approach. So certainly mitigation banks are considered a good thing because you're protecting the environment, but the consequence also is that it's for adverse impacts somewhere else. So you get these things called credits, with like money in the bank. Now you want 7 seagrass credits for putting a few markers out in Sarasota Bay, not even on his own property, that aren't regulatory. and we don't have a seagrass issue in Sarasota Bay now.
Seagrasses are federally protected, extremely well protected. It's the whole mitigation bank was a cynical ploy to try to address the fact that everybody thought the last go around he was going to wipe out the mangrove fringe. He's still going to wipe out the mangrove fringe.
So what,
a different way.
So basically, he's going to get he's asked for 7 seagrass credits. That allows him to dredge 7 acres in Sarasota Bay if he could get a permit from the Army Corps of a similar mitigation bank like he had from the state.
I want to get to 2 areas here. Number one is, in your opinion, this project is going to be about 3,000 homes,
correct,
so to speak. Do you believe that in the end is what it would be, or do you suspect or think that it's going to be a project that eventually will be bigger than what we believe it is, or is being told that?
There's only 270 buildable acres. Everybody talks about 500 and something acres, but much of that is the mitigation bank and the underwater lands of the seagrass beds. There's really only 270, I think 267 buildable acres on this thing. 2,900 units as expressed, I mean, if you can believe anything that they say. And so it's just like you do the math. He's just got to go up. It's got to go up, and that wall of buildings is what
go
you're
up in terms of a higher structure.
And the bottom line, we can't handle the amount of development on the west side without improving road improvements, and he proposes really no significant road improvements. And that's why people are mad as well. They're sick of the traffic, the congestion, and developers coming in and saying, oh, we're going to build 3,000 units, but by the way, we don't have to do a whole lot to improve the road network.
So the question then becomes, where do you all suspect this is going to go? It's going back to the planning board with more information in terms of what is going to be built where. These commissions do have a history of occasionally saying no to developers. In the end, are you concerned that this may be pushed through, or are you confident that the commissions will stand up like they did last time?
Well, I'm confident the commissioners will do the right thing. I have to believe that as a previous county commissioner. When they look at the facts that this violates the land development code and comprehensive plan, I think they'll have no choice but to deny this. He's asking for doing these variable width buffers, and they're not allowed according to the rules of the county the way he wants to do it. He doesn't provide a 50-foot buffer from the wetlands, which is important for the wetlands because the wetlands need that 50-foot of buffer for sea level rise and to prevent the nutrient loading into the mangroves, and for a variety of reasons that the scientists say we need at least 50 feet. It should be more. So,
there's there's innumerable violations.
Right.
If this is approved, it'll be riddled with violations. It will certainly get challenged.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if this is not built here, it may well be built in another community. I mean, Mr. Baroof and other developers are in it to create these kind of developments, and if it goes someplace else, it may be another county or community that...
Look, we're not against development. When I was a commissioner, we approved a plan in 2003 on Lombard Point that met the codes. Mr. Baroof has also just had a recent development approval about a year ago for 35-foot homes on the southern end of the property. So it's not like we're against development. We're just saying follow the rules, protect what we feel is important. And if you don't think Sarasota Bay is important, then tell that to the commercial fishermen and the recreational fishermen out there.
Jeff, just seconds left. I'll give you the last word, Andy.
Okay. What's proposed is incompatible with the area completely. It'll be the tallest buildings between downtown Sarasota and St. Petersburg, and it'll be right on top of the last pristine piece of shoreline on Sarasota Bay.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about our national lead story, the firing of FBI Director James Comey. Will Aqua by the Bay get the approval that Lombard Point could not? If so, what kind of impact will it have on Manatee County's wetlands and ecosystem? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. Andy, your prediction?
My prediction is he'll be back and something will go through at that place. Unless he keeps getting greedy and keeps going for these lousy projects. The thing that's terrible about this one with the 2,450-foot towers is that there's just nothing like it on the east coast of Florida, the west coast of Florida. There's nothing like it. Okay, so you want to make a world-class thing. Make a world-class mangrove shoreline, you know, make a utilize, employ what's there. What's there is already world-class. People come from all around the world to just look at that water, to go to those beaches, and so work with us, You know, keep your stuff to 35 feet, stay 500 feet away from the shoreline, leave everything intact. It's a beautiful place.
Joe, you're the former politician. Is there a compromise to be had here?
Well, with this developer, I don't think so, because I think he's trying to work the system in a piecemeal approach. And the hardest part that we have, everything seems to be changing all the time. You know, this permit here, this permit there. The one thing that I know are the people in Manatee County. And people in Manatee County appreciate our environment. We're already a unique place. We market, you know, to the world about how unique we are. People love the low rise, the low stress environment that we have outside of the traffic congestion getting to the island. You know, we really have a great place we live in. And so why do you want to experiment and change all that because one person wants to do a 180 of all the policies that we've had?
Experiment is the key word. This is the largest project by far, by an order of magnitude, that Carlos Baruf has ever done. So he's going to make all his mistakes on the bay.
The question is whether you trust the regulatory and the approval system.
Well, no, because they've already proven that they're politically driven. You know, as in the case of the DEP with the mitigation bank approval, did the 180 as soon as the politics got involved. They made the right call initially. Swift Mud basically kicking the can down the road, and the county almost kicked the can down the road.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but before we go, we want to share with us some of our viewers what some of our viewers are saying about President Trump's decision to fire FBI Director James Comey. Comey was 4 years into a 10-year term. This comes as the FBI is investigating possible coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia in the 2016 presidential election. The White House says the Russia probe had nothing to do with Comey's firing, listing the official reason as the mishandling of the Hillary Clinton investigation. Here's what some of you are saying. Barb Sally writes, so Trump fired the guy heading the investigation of him and his administration. Nixon tried to do this, and it didn't go so well. B. Kyles writes, comments on this are incredibly stupid. Comey should have been fired as soon as he would charge Hillary with treason. This is my opinion, which I have a right to, and you do. Damon Powers writes, holy hell, democracy just died in America today. Could Trump have possibly done anything to prove his own guilt more effectively than firing James Comey? What do you think about Aqua by the Bay? Join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And you could watch past Roundtable discussions. They're on demand, available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to both our guests for being here tonight. Joe McClash is the former Manatee County Commissioner, and Andy Maley is the Sun Coast Waterkeeper.